Welcome, everyone, to the Insurance Perspectives podcast. This is part one of our series on cake. On today's show, we have Clay Yomtop
Good being here, man.
and Adam Bowe.
Hey, man. Happy to be here.
Thank you both. Clay is going to get a full introduction in part two. As a sneak peek to give context to his contributions here in part one, Clay is an agency partner with over a decade of experience in the insurance industry. Adam Bowe is the CEO and co-founder of Cake. Now, it's hard to not know Adam or his co-founder John or the name Cake. They've been the talk of the insurance world for about 2 years as they've refined and launched their really impressive platform. We're going to have plenty of time to talk about that, I promise. But I have a more important thing to start this with, which is, while Adam, I know that you're currently in Florida, you hail from the great state of Kentucky. Is that correct?
I do. Yes.
So I want to kick this off with a question. How frustrating is it for you whenever you hear someone talk about the Cincinnati airport?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So for those that don't know, it's actually on the Kentucky side of the Ohio River. But yeah, CVG, man. It is not in
Yep.
Cincinnati. It is in Kentucky. It's one of the many great things about Kentucky. Actually, a really good airport, frankly. But
A fantastic
that's
airport.
that's hilarious that you know that. That's funny.
So my mother hails from Kentucky as well. She's from Boone County. And literally it's this hereditary thing. Like, if I hear someone is flying through Cincinnati, I have to be like, that's not in Ohio, right? And so when I was like looking through and I was like, oh, Cake's based in Lexington. I'm like, oh, okay. I figured that was just a good place to kind of set the foundation for us. We will pick up the thread about Kentucky in part two, I promise. But I would love for us to dive in and start our conversation about Cake. And we always like to start with the elevator pitch. So let's say you're trying to get to the 6th floor. You're on the 1st floor. Got to get to the 6th. What is that elevator pitch for Cake? What do you guys do for insurance agencies?
Yeah, we help make it easier for agents to buy and sell books of business. That's like the simplest phrase for it. I think, kind of an analogy would be like TurboTax, right? Like taxes are complicated, but that platform has made that simpler especially for kind of 80% of taxes, right? It's a kind of the 80-20 rule. We do the same thing for either divestitures, like so retirement or a fractional piece, or access and growth. And we think we do that really uniquely for small to medium sized agencies because kind of the super brokers of the world have traditionally been very active players in this. But we think that we kind of uniquely bring these tools and products to the smaller or medium-sized agencies.
So we ask every partner who is on our podcast the same 5 questions so that listeners can kind of effectively compare and contrast solutions that are out there. Cake is a bit of a unicorn in the space, at least for some of the specifics of what you do. I think there are other maybe merger and acquisitions brokers out there, but you guys kind of digitalize the solution. We like to start, our first question is about the story of a company or the story of an individual as well. And, we think that it's really important that that someone understands the why of a business, the why of an individual, to really bond with them and be able to effectively judge if they'd be the appropriate partner in their business. So I'd like to start asking you, why does Cake exist? And if you frame it a little differently, what is the reason for participating in the independent agency channel?
Yep, I think there's 2 answers to that question, right? Like there's the cold analytical answer, right, which is that 84% of agencies make less than $1.25 million a year in ARR. And a vast majority of that ownership, the book ownership within that group particularly, is by older producers, right? And so just a macro level of the industry, there's estimates that about 40% of agencies are going to change hands in the next 5 years. You got 17% of agency owners are 66 or older, and the average age is 54. You've just got a big slice of agency owners are from the baby boomer generation, and they're heading towards retirement, right? So there's this press to that just naturally a lot of these assets are going to be transacted. When I say assets, I mean agencies or books of business. Um, and then if you look at the way M&A has been done historically in this industry, it has largely been driven by, a lot of the bigger players, right? A lot of the names that we all know. And then even kind of the regional brokerages, the deal brokers, not the actual insurance brokerages, but the deal brokers. When you look there, they kind of floor target, somewhere around a $5 million in revenue, right?
Mm,
They can go a little lower, but they're people powered organizations. So they're
mm,
looking for a percentage of the total transaction, and the bigger the transaction is, which would be the higher EBITDA or higher revenue, um, the better it is for them, right? And so it takes around the same amount of time in a people powered organization to execute a transaction, whether it's big or small. An $8 million transaction is just inherently better for a people powered broker than a $1 million transaction, right?
mhm,
So you've got a majority of agencies that fall kind of outside of the core target market for the regional deal brokers, right? The big super brokers typically char or kind of target and look for agencies in that 8 to 10 million plus range, right? And they're easier to find. They kind of all know them. So you've got that group that can transact whenever they want to. Then you've got a group that's kind of locked out of the core transaction, but the majority of agencies live in that group, right? And so
mhm.
that's where a marketplace can really thrive, is where like aggregation and connectivity make a lot of sense. The company that my co-founder and I worked at previously was a marketplace, a transactional marketplace in manufacturing. We took that
Mm,
to an IPO and had a great exit. After that IPO, I was meeting with an agent who had sold his agency previously and was kind of talking me through that transaction, which kind of brought this pain point to light. And that's really where the marriage of what I love doing with the opportunity and the know-how that we have, right? Transactional marketplaces, while kind of core at their core is just bringing a buyer and a seller together, are simple. They're really hard to build well because you have to understand the uniqueness of each kind of industry's transaction or the niche transaction, and we're good at that. So it was kind of a triad of perfect, opportunity, interest, and skill set that drew us here.
that's awesome. Just the way you're approaching these things, there's such a sincere appreciation of the industry and the people in it, backed by like a really strong understanding of the facts and the details and like the not the calculus of it, but like just the you've done the research, which I think so feel a lot of times people will be like, I see this problem, I'm just gonna jump in and fix it. And there's not enough grounding in the numbers and in the data. And so I really appreciated that answer. I feel like we missed one aspect of it, which is why did you guys pick the name Cake?
I love a memorable name. I'm never going to name something the ABC company, right? Like it's got to be something that is memorable. And one of my favorite stories about Cake is I was at the Big I Legislative Conference, and we had like really barely done any marketing. It was like I was in product market research still. And I had an agent come up to me and be like, "Hey, are you the guy with Cake, like that is kind of looking to fix these transactions?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Dude, I got to tell you, that name, I don't love it, And I was like, yeah, but you came up and said, "Are you the guy with Cake?" Like you remembered me,
Yep.
right? And so like I never want to go with something that's like strictly offensive just to be memorable,
Yeah.
right? But I'm much more comfortable having that conversation where he already knows a little bit about us, right, and we're
Hmm.
memorable, than I am, trying to corner people and hand them my pamphlet and be like, "Give me 5 seconds to tell you everything about my company," and
Yeah.
they don't know anything about you. So I love the memorable names.
That's fantastic background on the name of the company, and it's definitely memorable. I can't wait until we get to encounter each other at a future trade show, and I can maybe get some cake swag. So Cake does a lot. It's a very powerful platform, very powerful marketplace on both the buying and the selling side of books of business and pieces slices of books of business. Um, if you had to pick one aspect of Cake that draws in and keeps customers, what would that be and why?
Yeah, I think it's our book valuation engine. What was most interesting about getting into this space was that there was kind of a rumor mill around the valuation of a book of business. You'd hear folks that were just throwing like huge number spreads out, right? Like one person would be like it's 1x top line revenue, the next person would be like it's 8x top line revenue. Another person's trying to calculate EBITDA, right? For an industry that's so regulated from like a financial perspective, it was surprising for me to get in and understand that there was that pain point. One of the things I said was, "Hey, this is agents' most valuable asset, right? Like besides their house, right, or anything like that, and even mostly for a lot of agents, bigger than their house. So it's going to be the thing that drives their retirement goals, right? And so to do any sort of planning around that, you have to understand what your asset is worth. So one of
Hmm.
the first things we built was our book valuation engine, and we give it away for free. So you can upload your book information. We'll talk about the HawkSoft integration. There's a couple other ways to get your data in if you're not a HawkSoft user, which everybody should be. So definitely do that. But we kind of view that as like the Zestimate, like the Zillow
Hmm.
Zestimate, right? Like
Sure.
a lot of people track that about their homes, and so we pull forward not only that valuation, so it gives you a low, a median, and a high multiple because there's some dynamics around, what type of transaction you do. Is it all cash? Is there an earnout? Is it retention, based? Things like that can mess with the multiple. But also like how many buyers are interested in, right? Like
Mm.
you could have a really valuable asset, but only one person, I think of like a Erie agent. Maybe it's like really kind of tightened up where there's a
Hmm.
limited market, and you can only find one other Erie agent that's looking to buy it. That's not going to drive a bidding war. But potentially you've got something where there's 5 agents that really want it, that can drive it up a little bit. So there's some dynamics just outside of like your book data that can drive the
Hmm.
multiple. But yeah, I think that's our biggest thing, and one of the tools that I'm like, kind of sells itself, but like also I'm always shocked if agents don't want it,
Hmm.
because to me, understanding the value of your biggest asset, is a really powerful tool, and one that's kind of evergreen useful, whether you're buying,
Yeah.
whether you're selling, understanding what you're growing or what you're transacting on is a really powerful tool. So I think that's the feature that best captures our intent.
Absolutely. And Clay, you had a pretty you found it very humorous when Adam mentioned the rumor mill around evaluation. Have you found that at the insurance company advisors group? Have you found that that is one of the trickier aspects of acquiring a book of business is getting an accurate value on it?
Kind of going back to what Adam said, with the Zillow situation, right? You always think what you have is a little bit more valuable than everybody else's stuff. So I think that does have a huge play on what they may think.
Hmm.
Going back to kind of what he said, people say, "Oh, I got it 8 times" or whatever, but they may. There's so many different factors in a book of business, right? Which is another key aspect of where Kate comes into play. Just from a carrier standpoint, but we'll get into that a little bit later.
Sure.
But if I know that, hey, I need to, if this guy's got an Erie appointment and I want to bonus with them or do something like that, or I need to hit a certain amount in premium to get an upwards in commission for the next year, something of that nature, that may be an avenue too where Kate comes into play, because we can break that off or go into that aspect, but also where it integrates with HawkSoft. See, that's going to allow both to kind of show me as we're selling and doing things. It takes a lot off the principal's plate just to kind of let the AI kind of
Yeah.
do its thing. And then we can run a report, look at it and say, hey, we thought we were going to be niched in this market, and that's not working out too well. We can transfer this way. So it allows you to do a lot of moving without guessing, if that makes any
Oh,
sense.
totally.
But yeah, I mean, but giving that low, medium, and high, it's a range, right? Could it be a lot higher? Absolutely. You start talking to a bigger firm or something like that, but from a small and medium agency that's not going to pay you an earn out or something like that, this is a more realistic expectation. And with everybody going back to everybody starting to just kind of getting to that point of retirement, this is going to allow a lot of us to not only when we purchase a book, but keep the book active, keep it going, where we're not losing a lot of policies on the back end, because we can utilize, HawkSoft, Cake, the other AI companies to, this is the best fit for our book. Not every book is, what we should buy. And we're able to just kind of hone in, get that in there, and just keep moving day-to-day operations by growing, just another avenue of growing without just completely organic at the same time.
Totally.
So, yeah.
Oh, I love that. And I think that's a good preview for what we're going to dive into in part 2 as well. Normally this is a harder pivot in the middle of our question set, but I think it's a very natural question to ask when talking to a company that kind of looks at as much data about an agency as you can get. Data ownership is this key concept at HawkSoft and this key focus for our customers. Our position is that we're a steward of the data that an agency stores in their management system. It's not ours; it belongs to the agency. They did the hard work for it. Um, Adam, you guys, like I mentioned, you have to work with a lot of data. How does Cake approach data ownership with regards to your agency customers?
We don't monetize agents' data. We don't own agents' data. We don't sell it to anybody, right? We also we're very cognizant that like we're touching really sensitive data. So when we integrate with an AMS system, we actually have about 3 different waypoints before it hits our platform. Where we're like cleaning out PII information of your customers. So like that never touches our platform, right? Any sort of like addresses in there or a geolocation that is created, not the actual address, right? So not only are we cognizant that that agents continue to own their information, and that Cake is I love the steward word for that. We're not monetizing it, but also that anytime you're talking about a transaction, we have to be able to pull through the data and show it at the right time that the seller wants to expose that to the buyer, right? But like our listings summarize information to the point where a buyer can get a good sense that they're interested in that, right? But can't actually see like the raw policy level details without the seller approving that, right? And also the seller is anonymous until they approve to interact with the buyer, right? So we're even like protecting just like seller contact information, because a lot of sellers don't want to be known that they're actively selling until they move into that.
I really appreciate the care that you guys have taken with this, with solving this problem, and also approaching it from like just a very understanding position of like what are the needs of each role in the process and in the transaction side of it. There's so often enough that it's a known thing, but inside HawkSoft we'll put little notes on client files being like, agency owner is thinking about retiring, don't mention to staff, like because it's sensitive stuff. Like when people are thinking about what to do with their business, there's a lot of sensitivity to it, and so I really appreciate the care that you guys have taken in walking through that. I think you're going to be able to give us a very interesting answer to this next question I have for you. So we view the Insurance Perspectives podcast as a dialogue between technology providers and insurance professionals. We're here to facilitate a good conversation between folks like Adam and Clay. And Adam, I think you have a really unique perspective because while you dove headfirst into the insurance space, um, it's not necessarily your background. Your a majority of your expertise comes from a different arena that you've been able to leverage very well in this industry. With your unique perspective, I would love to know what is the hardest part of working with insurance agencies.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's you know, twofold. There might be a third leg here, but the two main ones is that especially the size agency that we're talking about, agents want to spend time with you. They want tools built that will help them, right? If you can
Mm,
get time with them, they're some of the most receptive and engaging folks that will sit there and like beta test your product, give you feedback, all that kind of stuff. Getting time with them is hard. The agents themselves, if they're not selling, if they're on the phone with me, they're not on the phone with a client. A lot of the smaller agencies, you've got a owner who's a producer who needs to be on the phone selling, right? And so I think that time aspect is really hard. And then I think there's also a little bit of like uh, maybe not buyer's remorse, but like they touched the stove and got burned by InsurTechs, kind of like
mm-hmm.
InsurTech Wave 1.0 or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But they came out and said agents are a dinosaur distribution channel, and we're going to beat them, and then they all got smoked, and now they use the agents as the main distribution channel, but that started kind of like a conflict relationship instead of a
Mm-hmm.
collaborative relationship. And so I think a lot of insurtechs today that are building the right way are kind of trying to repair that a little bit and make sure we show up the right
Yeah.
way. So I think that time aspect, and then I think there's some stuff that's outside of the agent's control. I mean, for me, I was like, when I was coming in, I was like, okay, every time I create a renew my auto policy or my home policy, right? Like that data is pretty consistent. It's there, right? It should be incredibly easy to. I bet there's a wealth of data that's like really well structured and really easy to access, right? Um, but then you've got data in AMSs, you've got data on the carrier side, you've got data, you got paper-based agencies, you've got agencies running out of Excel sheets, right? And so I think getting into the industry, I was surprised about just what data is in the agent's control and what isn't,
Mm-hmm.
and so
Mm-hmm.
some of the hardest stuff is that the agent may not have the information you need, and then the insurtech can't get access to that either, right? There's this like third or
Mm-hmm.
fourth party that's involved, and so some of the hardest parts is outside of the agent control. But I think the main piece is like uh, I want agents to trust us. We know we're building the right way, right? But you're trying to repair stuff that other people did, not you did, from
Yeah.
5-10 years ago, and you're fighting for time and attention. And
Mm-hmm.
while I really understand the thing we're conflicting with is the main driver of growth for them, that valuable resource is it's scarce, and we want more of it.
I think that's very true. I'm often on the record saying that independent insurance agents are sincerely the busiest people I know. And it's kind of a great segue to offer some gratitude to Clay for carving out time in his day to be on this. And does that resonate with you, that kind of calculus of, can I give 90 minutes to my insurtech partners, or would I better be served using that 90 minutes to work with clients or work with agents that I'm trying to acquire? Do you feel like that is a struggle for you yourself, Clay, or just your peers as independent agency owners? Like, is that a pain point you have?
I would say that it's something that's coming to head now. I think the
Mm,
insurance industry in itself has to keep evolving or start to evolve almost in a way is probably the best way to put that. Um, because if it's been the same for so long, right? And so now AI and all these other companies are finally hitting the insurance industry. So if we don't pay attention now, we're
Hmm.
the big guys are going to be the ones that take over because they're going
Hmm.
to have the funds and everything like that to kind of pay for all the technology that they need and different things like that. So I think it's better to learn. And one of the main reasons we opened this agency in itself was to be very tech forward.
Hmm.
To take not necessarily not have as many people in the agency, but if you have a platform that you can use that is going to help them do 2 to 3 times the amount of work for the same price, why not do that? So that's kind of what our focus has been on. I think there's a lot of things coming into the marketplace that are really, really great for the industry. So my thought process has always been, hey, let's help them help us at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it just is a mutual relationship. And kind of like Adam was saying, I mean, we are very, especially the younger guys, very niche group.
Hmm.
If a product launches incorrectly, it might not be the best thing for that company at the time because word's going to get around quick. I mean, we all tend to help each other out and do all of that. So,
The last thing I'll say here is, what Clay was saying on the big guys. I want to make sure, and I feel like I try to say this all the time, but I hope agents, especially what I was talking about, that 84%, but even when you start getting into like 5 million, $8 million and less, that starts to be like 96% of all of the agencies, right? 2% make 10
Yeah.
million or more. So just from again, like kind of cold calculus perspective of business owner, I can either have a really small segment of customers. If I'm building for the top 100 brokerages in the country, right? I got 100 people, the 100 companies that I can build for. So I got to be able to charge them, $50,000, $100,000 yearly SaaS fees or something like that for it to start to make sense when it comes to like venture backed, or like, some of the stuff some of the startups that would get in. Those numbers really, you're capped on growth. You've got a really small market. So the rest of the agencies, while you have to interact with the big boys sometimes, the rest of the agencies, you guys have so much power to shape the solutions that are built here. And
Hmm.
insurtechs are desperate to work with the majority of agencies, and so
Hmm.
I don't know. There's something intriguing around like almost like a collective bargaining agreement. I think about like what's happening in college with like the student athletes, but like the aggregating the wants, needs, demands of kind of the masses of small to medium sized agencies. They can shape the future because I can just tell you as an insurtech founder, I'm desperate to listen and be responsive to those pain points
Yeah.
and find ways to solve it because there's a lot of upside for us as well.
Totally. And that brings us to the last question I have for you then. And you've touched on this throughout our conversation, and I know you have a lot of fondness for the industry. But Adam, from your perspective, what is the best part of working with insurance agencies?
Macro level, when you get the time, just amazing feedback, amazing. Like they want to share all, like there's no secrets in the industry. They're like, hey, this is what sucks. You know what I mean? And so if you can fix it, great. Right. And as a problem solver, I love that. Right. Like I almost have to force myself to stay focused on like our core activities because I'm constantly like, oh, it'd be so
Hmm.
interesting if you could do X, Y, and Z, right? Um, and the welcomingness to the industry. So if you're willing to show up collaboratively, man, the response and the work from the industry is amazing. And then I think the uh, specific to Cake, you've built this amazing agency, this amazing book of business, to help folks realize that liquidity in that asset and secure their retirement or to get access to inorganic growth and grow their agency the way they want to. Like, I think that largely this is the biggest single transaction that agents will make if they're actually like retiring and kind of selling. And so to be able to honor that and help them and reduce friction in that, like it's kind of a magical moment because they're super super excited to receive that help. And really excited to enter into that transaction. And then on the Clay side, you get to help. He's building something really unique and really cool, and so to help facilitate that in any way is I love that.
And I hope folks can kind of really appreciate the passion that comes through, because it is very sincere. And it has always been the case when we've had conversations about cake, why you guys do what you do. This brings us to kind of the end of part one. I want to point out some factual information is kind of the best way to do it. Cake is an API partner with HawkSoft. We launched earlier this year, which means that agencies like Clay that use HawkSoft as their management system have the ability to allow Cake to access their book of business for those analytics and doing the kind of valuation component of it. And then also there's some other functionality in how, with that data access, Cake can slice up the book of business and help facilitate those transactions. Anything I missed, Adam, about how HawkSoft and Cake work together?
Anybody on HawkSoft that's either actively going through a transaction, even if it originated off Cake, we would love to help with either the kind of the ingestion of data. So like if you buy a book, how we can kind of potentially help there if you're doing some sort of valuation on that. I think Clay is going to get into that a little bit on his part two. And then, yeah, the only thing I'll underline is the valuation tool is free. So, again, would be surprised if every agent doesn't take advantage of it because it's really powerful information. And then if you're looking to sell, I'd love to help you along this transaction and see how we can help.
Well, thank you, Adam, for being in the hot seat today, and thank you, Clay, for supporting us along the way. Thank you for watching today's episode. Click the video description below to learn more about our guests and to view the latest podcast episode as well as other content from HawkSoft. We appreciate you watching and hope you join us next time on the Insurance Perspectives podcast. Thank you.